Right, on to politics. And Marine Le Pen has declared her party triumphant in the first round of the French elections, virtually, as she said, wiping out Emmanuel Macron.
Well, that was the first round of voting yesterday, and it's a bruising backfire for President Macron, who called this snap vote following Le Pen's surge in the recent European election. And people, Jay says, the similarities are striking. Macron calls a snap election and it backfires spectacularly. Sunak calls a snap election and it does exactly the same.
Well, speaking of Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister's turning up the heat against right-wing insurgents in the UK as he aims to win over the millions of as-yet undecided voters.
Deputy Political Editor for The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikhailova, is here this morning with her take on things. How do you read what you see and what's happening in France?
In France, well, I mean, it's a huge night for Marine Le Pen and an absolute humiliation for Emmanuel Macron and his whole strategy of calling an election, but it's also a really big verdict of just how unpopular he's become and his government. And people who don't, that know the system, the numbers sort of... Her party has won about 30% of the vote, but that is the equivalent of a landslide, particularly when you consider the other element, which is Macron's actually come third. So the party that's come second is the Corbyn-type hard left. So the real choice at the next round of voting will be effectively a choice between the hard right and the hard left, which I think will favour Le Pen again.
We should point out, actually, Macron and Le Pen themselves are not involved in this. This is not a presidential election. This is for the Assembly, and the Assembly just deals with domestic policy. Macron will still be in charge of international policy, which affects us in the UK, as well as the armed forces. But as Eamon was asking a little bit earlier on, what does this mean for us in the UK? Will it change our relationship? Should she be as successful, or indeed the National Rally Party, in the second round?
Well, first of all, there's going to be a lot of commentary about what this means. Will there, we're seeing this rise of the right in France, in Italy. A lot of it is very much a backlash to how immigration has been handled. In fact, Le Pen's party has run on a ticket of we're going to pledge to actually really cut net migration to 10,000, a debate that might be familiar to, obviously, people at home here.
That was a long time ago. We were talking about 10,000.
Exactly.
David Cameron days, but it's a long time since we thought we could ever get anywhere near that.
So that will put a lot of Conservatives on notice who have overseen these absolutely ballooning numbers. However, Andrew Neil has a really interesting piece in today's Daily Mail where he actually argues that this could be a benefit to Keir Starmer, assuming Keir Starmer wins the election, because the instability over in France, which almost certainly will follow from this, might turn markets off France a little bit and might bring some investment back to the UK, because it might make the UK, in contrast, look like a more stable place to put your money, which is, of course, exactly what Labour is hoping on. Their whole strategy is to try and boost growth without really explaining how. So there could be a short-term benefit in a way, but really, long-term, there has to be a really big debate about both illegal migration and legal migration, because the numbers in the UK are much higher than in France on net migration.
But, Anna, it doesn't mean that Keir Starmer could turn to France and say, hey, help us out with this migration situation, because they won't be interested, will they?
Exactly. And that, in fact, that makes that challenge, I think, much harder for the UK, but particularly the UK with a Labour government, which, let's be honest, is just... Rishi Sunak has clearly not really managed to stop the boats as he promised, but I don't think many people look at what Starmer's promising and actually believe that it's going to have...
Well, just briefly, because we are 3 days out from our election here, and just a word about this battle that's sort of happening now between Sunak and Farage to try and win over the undecideds. Is there a change in approach here where there's less of the kind of condemnation and disgust coming from people? And we've got Kemi Badenoch today saying her heart breaks whenever she hears that people are voting for reform and sort of wooing them back. Is that an interesting change of tack, do you think?
I certainly think that is the smart approach from Kemi Badenoch, because I mean, the voters just in this election campaign that I've met who say they're going to vote reform, it is striking how many of them are really what you would call true blues. So people who have been Conservative all their lives. Often they're people who they've known their local MP, they've been engaged with the party. So these are real Tories who are just so fed up with the government and so angry that they actually are saying, right, we're going to go to reform. So, of course, there's an effort underway to woo them back. And it's interesting, Kemi Badenoch, who is obviously touted as a future leader of the party, trying to effectively start repairing those bridges. And then a big mistake would be to try and make those voters feel like, oh, we don't want you. I mean, that would be a huge mistake. I think the interesting element here as well is when people look at Rishi Sunak, almost everyone knows he's not going to be leader afterwards. So Nigel Farage's argument of, well, I'm going to be there in Parliament, even if I've only got a couple of MPs, I'm presenting myself as the effective opposition. While in terms of parliamentary numbers, that might be a bit ridiculous. I can see why people voting might say, well, actually, hang on, I don't even know who's going to lead the Conservatives. I don't know if they're going to be a strong voice.
I don't know who I'm voting for,
Exactly.
almost.
I don't know who's going to come out of the other end of this and whether or not there'll be a strong voice to oppose Labour. We know that Nigel Farage will be, of all the things he is, he will definitely be a strong voice in Parliament if he gets in. So you can understand why people are looking at that and being tempted by it.
Interesting point. OK, Anna Mikhailova, Deputy Political Editor for The Mail on Sunday. Thanks very much indeed.